What if the way you've been thinking about sex your whole life is actually what's been quietly robbing you of intimacy in your later years? Let me tell you about Robert. He was 72, recently divorced after a long marriage, and for the first time in years, he'd met someone who made him feel alive again. She was warm, funny, and genuinely interested in him. One evening, things started to move in a romantic direction, and Robert figured it would just happen naturally, the way it always had when he was younger. But his body didn't cooperate. He panicked. She sensed it and quietly excused herself. And after that night, Robert never called her again. Not because he didn't want to, but because he was convinced something was permanently broken inside him. I'm Dr. Ava Remington. I'm a urologist and men's health specialist, and I've been doing this work for over 20 years. In that time, I've sat across from thousands of men in their 60s, 70s, and 80s, who came to me not just with physical concerns, but carrying a kind of shame they'd never spoken out loud to anyone. What I've learned is this: most of the suffering I see isn't caused by aging itself. It's caused by things nobody ever told these men, truths they deserved to know decades earlier. Today, I want to share 5 of those truths with you, and I want to be straight with you about what it costs when you don't know them. If this sounds like it's for you, go ahead and hit subscribe and turn on notifications. This channel exists for people who want real information, not fluff. Drop a 1 in the comments if you're still with me. Drop a 0 if you're on the fence. Either way, I want to hear from you. Let's start with secret number 1. And honestly, this one alone has caused more unnecessary heartbreak in the men I've treated than almost anything else. The belief that sex after 60 should still be spontaneous. And the brutal price men pay when they hold on to that idea. When you were in your 30s and 40s, things just happened. You didn't need to plan anything. The mood hit, your body responded, and everything lined up. A lot of men remember that and assume that's just how it's supposed to work. So when it doesn't work that way anymore, they conclude something must be wrong with them. Here's the truth. Nothing is wrong with you. The rules changed, and nobody gave you the memo. I can't tell you how many men have walked into my office in Chicago, unable to make eye contact with me. These aren't men who are sick or broken. They're men who tried to be spontaneous the way they were at 35. Their body didn't respond the way they expected. And one moment of disappointment spiraled into months, sometimes years, of avoidance. They stopped reaching for their partner. They made excuses. They went quiet. And that quiet distance became emotional distance. And emotional distance became loneliness. I had a patient, I'll call him Dennis, he was 68, retired engineer, sharp as a tack, healthy by most measures. He'd been widowed and had started dating again, which took enormous courage. He came to see me after what he called an embarrassing situation. He'd been with someone he really liked, didn't plan anything, just let the evening unfold the way it would have in 1987. And when his body didn't perform, he was so humiliated he ghosted her completely. He told me, "That night I felt like I stopped being a man." I hear some version of that sentence more than you'd think. Here's what I tell every man in that chair. Losing spontaneity is not the same as losing intimacy. Sex in your 30s was built on biology. Sex after 60 has to be built on intention, communication, and a little bit of preparation. That's not weakness, that is wisdom. And the intimacy you can experience with that foundation, it's often deeper and more meaningful than anything you had before. Planning an intimate evening doesn't kill the romance. It honors it. It says to your partner and to your own body that this matters. Reduce stress beforehand. Watch what you drink. Be aware of your medications. Give your body a running start instead of a cold start. When you stop demanding that your body perform like it's decades younger, you stop experiencing it as failure. And you start experiencing it as connection. And here's something I cannot stress enough. Ignoring this truth can get dangerous. Trying to force spontaneity the way you did at 40, especially if you're mixing medications, skipping prescribed doses, or using supplements without talking to a doctor, puts real strain on your cardiovascular system. I've consulted with widows whose husbands died in situations that were entirely preventable. That's not a scare tactic. That's just the reality I've watched play out in my career. The good news is that once you understand this shift, everything gets better. The anxiety lifts. The connection comes back, and you get to show up as the man you actually are right now. Not a lesser version of who you were, but a wiser, more present version. Now, before we get to secret 2, I need to tell you something that most men in my practice wish someone had flagged for them years earlier. Because what I'm about to share isn't really about sex at all. It's about whether your heart is silently sending you an SOS. Secret number 2. An erection isn't just about performance. It's a window into your cardiovascular health. And ignoring what it's trying to tell you can cost you your life. I'll be direct with you. If you're over 60 and you've noticed changes in your ability to get or maintain an erection, that is not just a bedroom issue. That is potentially a warning from your heart. Most men treat erectile dysfunction as something embarrassing to laugh off or ignore. Or they grab something from the drugstore and move on. What they don't know, because nobody ever told them, is that erections are a cardiovascular event. They depend on healthy blood flow. And the arteries that supply blood to the penis are significantly smaller than the arteries supplying your heart and brain. That means they show blockage first. If blood isn't flowing freely down there, there's a real chance the blood heading to your heart and your brain is running into the same problem. I want to tell you about a patient of mine. I'll call him Gary. 67 years old, still working part-time, active, married. He came in and mentioned that things in the bedroom had changed a little. He kind of chuckled and said, "Doc, I figure it's just age catching up with me, right?" I didn't laugh. Something didn't sit right with me. I asked him a few more questions and ordered some additional testing, including a cardiology referral. 3 weeks later, Gary was in the hospital having surgery. His left anterior descending arteries, what cardiologists call the widowmaker, was 90% blocked. He called me from his hospital bed and said, "I came in about a bedroom problem and found out I had a time bomb in my chest." Erectile dysfunction is frequently one of the earliest clinical signs of cardiovascular disease. The body is whispering. Too many men wait until it's screaming, until a stroke, until a heart attack in their sleep, until it's too late to undo the damage. Some men brush it off as stress. Some attribute it entirely to age. Some self-medicate with supplements or over-the-counter products, never mentioning it to their doctor. And all the while, they may be living with undiagnosed high blood pressure, arterial disease, or type 2 diabetes that hasn't been caught yet. The emotional fallout is real too. When your body isn't doing what you expect, your confidence takes a hit. Your self-image suffers. You start pulling away from your partner, first physically, then emotionally. You feel yourself shrinking from the world, and that isolation creates its own health consequences, which brings me to secret 3. But first, please hear this clearly. If you've noticed changes in this area, do not hide it. Don't laugh it off. Don't assume it's just getting older. Talk to your doctor. Get a cardiovascular workup. One uncomfortable appointment could protect the next 10 years of your life. And your family's. The good news, when the root cause is addressed, whether it's blood flow, hormones, or something else entirely, most men see real improvement. I've had men in their early 70s tell me they feel better than they did at 50. Not magic, just medicine applied at the right time. Secret number 3, sex isn't just a physical act. For men over 60, it's emotional medicine. And cutting yourself off from intimacy has health consequences you're probably not even tracking. Think back to a moment when you felt genuinely connected to someone. Not just physical, but where you felt truly seen, understood. Like their presence said, "I'm here, and I'm glad you are too." For a lot of men, those moments become rare as they get older. And many men tell themselves that's just how it goes. You get stoic. You get self-sufficient. You stop needing that stuff. Here's what I've learned from over 2 decades in men's health. That's not maturity. That's slow self-destruction. I had a patient, I'll call him Carl, 74, widowed about 5 years before he came to see me. He didn't have a specific physical complaint. He told me, "I just feel nothing." His wife had passed, and somewhere along the way, he'd quietly decided that intimacy didn't belong in his life anymore. He said, and I remember this clearly, "At my age, what's the point?" But when I looked at him, what I saw was a man who was starving for connection, a warm hand, a real conversation, someone to laugh with. That emotional disconnection had already started affecting him physically. His blood pressure was harder to manage. He wasn't sleeping. He'd slipped into a depression that hadn't responded well to medication alone. What Carl didn't know, but what most men in his generation were never taught, is that intimacy isn't a luxury. It's a biological need. Physical closeness with another person triggers the release of oxytocin, dopamine, and serotonin. These aren't feel-good extras. They regulate mood, reduce cortisol, your stress hormone, improve sleep, strengthen immune function, and lower cardiovascular risk. When you deprive yourself of intimacy, you're not being tough. You're removing a critical pillar of your health. And this isn't only about having a romantic partner. Some of the loneliest men I've seen are married. They share a house but haven't truly connected in years. And some of the most emotionally vital men I know are single because they've stayed close to friends, stayed engaged with people they care about, kept reaching out. The issue isn't relationship status. The issue is whether you're allowing yourself to connect at all. I want to ask you something directly. Have you felt numb to closeness lately? Have you been telling yourself that affection just doesn't matter anymore? Have you been pulling back when someone reaches towards you? If so, you may be in what I call emotional lockdown. And the cost is bigger than you realize. Chronic loneliness increases dementia risk. It raises cortisol levels that damage your heart. It accelerates cognitive decline. I've watched men aged 10 years in the space of 2 when they lost their emotional anchor and never found another. But here's what I want you to know. It's not too late. Reconnection doesn't have to be dramatic. It starts with one honest conversation. One moment where you don't brush off someone's attempt to get close. One quiet acknowledgement to yourself. I want to feel connected again. That's not weakness. That's the most courageous health decision an older man can make. Secret number 4, pornography is quietly destroying the confidence and intimacy of older men. And almost nobody's talking about it. This is one I don't bring up lightly, but after 20 years of working with men, I have to be honest with you, because I've seen the same pattern repeat itself too many times. When men start noticing that their body is slower to respond, takes more time to get aroused, recovery is longer, things don't quite line up the way they used to. A lot of them don't reach toward their partner. They pull back, and quietly when they're alone, they turn to pornography. It's fast, it's private, it's always available, it doesn't require vulnerability. And for a while it seems harmless. But here's what's actually happening in the brain. Pornography is engineered for maximum stimulation, constant novelty, no emotional investment required, no real-world friction. Over time, the brain recalibrates its expectations around that artificial standard. And real intimacy, which is slower, imperfect, emotionally loaded, and requires trust, starts to feel underwhelming by comparison. I had a patient. I'll call him Tom, 71, retired Navy, proud guy, strong. He came in, and I could tell something had been weighing on him for a long time. Eventually, he told me he hadn't touched his wife in nearly 4 years. He'd drifted into a daily pornography habit after noticing some performance changes. And without realizing it, real intimacy had been slowly replaced. He'd started comparing his wife, her body, her responses, everything, to what he was watching. She felt it. She stopped reaching for him. They were living as roommates, Tom told me. I don't even know when it happened. I didn't make a decision. It just slid. That's how it works. It's not a dramatic choice. It's a slow drift. And the damage it does into self-confidence, to relational warmth, to the ability to experience genuine arousal with a real person is significant. Research supports what I've seen clinically. There's a growing body of evidence linking habitual pornography use to desensitization, delayed ejaculation, and what's being called porn-induced erectile dysfunction, which is distinct from vascular or hormonal causes. The treatment is different too. Medication doesn't fix a brain-based pattern. The work has to happen at a deeper level, and beyond the physical effects, there's the emotional cost, the guilt, the shame, the sense that you've been living a secret life. I've seen men describe feeling hollow, watching more and more, but feeling less and less, asking themselves, what's wrong with me? Nothing is wrong with you, but the habit is working against you. Recovery starts with honesty. First with yourself, recognizing that what you're consuming is reshaping your expectations and your emotional responses. Real intimacy is not faster or flashier. It's slower, more vulnerable, and 1,000 times more satisfying in the long run. The brain can recalibrate, but it takes time and intention. If this hits close to home, you're not alone, and you don't have to figure it out by yourself. A good men's health specialist or a therapist who works with sexual health can help you navigate this without judgment. The goal isn't shame, the goal is getting back to the real thing. Secret number 5. And this one genuinely scares me to see because it's the one most likely to cost a man his life. The most dangerous moment in an older man's intimate life is when he decides he has something to prove. You know the situation. Maybe you got a clean bill of health at your last checkup. Maybe an old friend said something like, "Man, you've still got it." Maybe you met someone who sparked something in you that you hadn't felt in a long time. And in that moment, a familiar feeling rises up. I've still got this. I can still perform, watch. And that impulse to prove it is exactly when things go wrong. I want to tell you about a patient I think about often. I'll call him Frank. He was 74, charismatic, full of life, and he'd recently started seeing a woman who was quite a bit younger than him. He came in for a follow-up and made a joke about it, said, "Doc, a man's got to maintain his reputation." I looked him dead in the eye and told him, "Sexual activity is physical exertion. Your cardiovascular system is not what it was at 44. You need to respect that." He nodded, laughed a little, said, "I know my limits." 2 weeks later, Frank collapsed in a hotel room. His companion called for help. By the time paramedics arrived, it was too late. He wasn't reckless by nature. He wasn't stupid. He just let his ego make a decision that his body wasn't ready to support. Here's what happens physiologically in that situation. Heart rate spikes, blood pressure surges, blood vessels dilate rapidly, and the body is under the same kind of stress as climbing several flights of stairs at a hard pace. For a well-conditioned heart in a younger man, that's fine. For a heart that hasn't been fully evaluated, or for a man who skipped his blood pressure medication that morning, or who combined a couple of drinks with an over-the-counter enhancement product. It can be a catastrophic combination. I've sat with women who've lost their husbands in exactly this way. They sometimes say, with a sad kind of humor, "Well, he went doing what he loved." But behind that is grief, and the recognition that it didn't have to happen. The desire itself is not the problem. The problem is when ego overrides biology. When you treat your partner as an audience instead of a companion, when the goal shifts from connection to performance. Here's the truth. Your worth as a man in that moment has nothing to do with how long or how hard. It has everything to do with how honest and how present you are. Slowing down is not surrender. Taking care of your body before and during intimacy is not weakness. It is the single most important thing you can do to make sure you're still here for the people who love you. If you feel that urge to prove something, pause. Ask yourself honestly, is this about connection? Or is this about fear? Because if it's about fear, the answer is never found in performance. Now here is where I want to bring all 5 of these together, because individually they're important, but together they tell a story. Most of the suffering I've described didn't come from disease. It didn't come from bad luck. It came from silence. Men who didn't know that the rules change after 60. Men who ignored a signal their body was sending them for years. Men who let emotional walls convince them they didn't need closeness anymore. Men who drifted into habits that quietly disconnected them from the real thing. Men who let one unguarded moment of pride override everything their doctor told them. The hardest part of aging, in my experience, isn't the physical changes. It's the weight of feeling like you can't talk about it. The shame of thinking you're the only one going through it. The loneliness of suffering quietly because asking for help doesn't feel like something you do. But you're not alone in this. Not even close. The men who come through my office are not unusual. They're just honest enough and are desperate enough to finally sit down and say something. Your body isn't betraying you. It's changing. And every change is something you can understand, adapt to, and in many cases, improve. To recap what we've covered, first, spontaneity after 60 is a myth that causes real damage. Replace it with intention and preparation, and the intimacy you experience becomes richer, not poorer. Second, erectile dysfunction is frequently a cardiovascular warning sign. Don't ignore it, don't self-medicate, get checked out, because catching it early can save your life. Third, emotional intimacy is not optional. It's biological medicine, and disconnecting from it accelerates aging and disease in ways that are well documented. Fourth, Habitual pornography use rewires your brain's expectations in ways that quietly destroy real intimacy and real confidence, and recovery is absolutely possible. Fifth, the most dangerous thing you can do is let ego override biology in an intimate moment. Slow down, be present, and understand that being there tomorrow matters more than any performance tonight. If something I've said today landed for you, even if it made you uncomfortable, even if it stirred something you've been pushing down for a while, don't let it just slide by. Talk to your doctor. Make that appointment you've been putting off. Have an honest conversation with your partner. Or, if you're not sure where to start, drop a question in the comments. I read them. And if you've been sitting with any of what I described, the quiet loneliness, the avoidance, the feeling that this part of your life is just over, I want you to hear this directly from me as your doctor. It is not over. Not unless you decide it is. There is still more connection ahead of you. More joy, more warmth, more love that is actually felt, not just maintained out of habit. But it starts with one choice: to stop just enduring your life and to start living it again. If this video meant something to you, hit subscribe, leave a 1 in the comments, and share it with someone who needs to hear it. This channel is here for people who want the truth, and you deserve nothing less than that.